Alright guys, we're back. Still sitting in front of my fireplace, although I'm a little warmer than earlier. We are talking about designers. The designer's job in the theater is to control environment. Scenic, lighting, and costume designers contribute effects that the audience sees. Sound designers create effects that the audience hears. These sensory impressions not only communicate information to the audience in an efficient way, but also influence the audience's emotional involvement with the play. The designers help to shape the audience experience. Their individual contributions become part of the whole and affect the work of the rest of the company. Effective designers in the theater today must be both inspired artists and collaborators. The development of the designer. In the long history of the theater, the prominence of designers is somewhat new. Of course, someone has always designed or decorated scenery or the performance environment. Someone has always designed, purchased, made, or selected costumes and masks. Someone has always provided properties. Once theatrical activity moved indoors, someone had to find a way to illuminate it. From the earliest group performances, someone was writing and performing music and working on offstage sounds. Few names of theater architects or scenic designers before the 17th century are known to us, but someone had to design and build all of those remarkable theaters in Greece, Rome, and their colonies and territories. Before the 19th century, few designers were publicly credited. And now, of course, designers are usually recognized and sometimes well compensated for their contributions to the professional theater. Designers are usually at the heart of production preparation long before actors begin rehearsing a new production. What precipitated this change? Perhaps the two biggest factors were the rise of the modern director and the advent of the electrical lighting, both in the late 19th century. As early as the 5th century BCE in Greece, the playwright Aeschylus was credited with providing some kind of skenographia, or decoration of the skene stage house, upstage of the orchestra, or the circular performance space at the Theater of Dionysus. An important shift in the West arrived during the Italian Renaissance with innovations in perspective drawing and painting. Flat painted scenery often dynamically recreated detail and accurate images of palatial buildings, town squares, and sylvan glades. This type of scenery, called wing, drop, and border scenery, included flat painted panels on either side of the stage wings, a large expanse of painted fabric upstage, the drop, and strips of cloth or panels hung horizontally across the tops of the wings, the borders. Italian designers such as Giacomo Torelli and Giuseppe Bibbiena achieved fame throughout Europe for their scenic designs and theater architecture in the 17th and 18th centuries, but most of their work was in the service of court entertainments and opera, neither of which followed the strict guidelines of neoclassicism, the ruling system of the theater. Consequently, the generic design approach that was popularized by Sebastiano Serlio in the 16th century became the standard. Each theater company had a handful of settings that could serve many different plays, a standard urban exterior or domestic interior for comedy, a generic palatial exterior or interior for tragedy, and a wooded exterior or domestic interior for tragicomedy. Accordingly, few audience members paid attention to the designs and often took them for granted. The sets were usually background indicators for the play. No artist made his living solely or primarily as a scenic designer. Theater designs were supplemental, a source for extra money to be made on an occasional basis. By the mid-18th century, a few theater managers had decided it was time for a change. In London, actor-manager David Garrick decided to remove the audience members from onstage seating and create a new focus for the stage environment. From France, he hired Philip de Loutherbourg, an innovative designer who created many new settings for the repertory of the Drury Lane Theatre. De Loutherbourg used grand rows, low, flat-painted scenery at stage levels that extended the line of the wing out toward the center stage. The development invited the audience to focus on the floor and playable environment, not just on scenery above the floor. He also experimented with transparencies for transformation scenes as well as color media for candlelight and oil lamps. Early on, he understood the importance of lighting to the theater. Convinced that audiences would be fascinated by the latest technology, de Loutherbourg created a miniature theater for exhibition halls using scenery without an accompanying play. Audiences came to watch his tiny scene shifts and innovative special effects which suggested what full-size stages would support in the 19th century. It was in the 19th century that three-dimensional scenery changed audience expectations of the possibilities for scenic design. The box set, an enclosed set with walls and sometimes ceiling, became a standard for interiors after 1830. This innovation invited designers to decorate the stage floor as in a house or palace, for example, increase the number of set properties, such as furniture, in imitation of contemporary interiors, and coaxed actors to move upstage off the apron and inside the box. Beginning in 1958, in what was then Czechoslovakia, Josef Svoboda combined platforms, three-dimensional scenery, and open space with projection screens, mixed film with still projections, and mastered the art of projected scenery. Sometimes he completely transformed space with lighting alone. In the wake of Svoboda, and with the aid of modern computer-generated imaging for both lighting and sets in creating designs as well as executing the designs on stage, the possibility for the theatrical design seemed nearly limitless. Such computerized imaging is at its busiest in Las Vegas shows such as Cirque du Soleil and Broadway musicals such as Wicked and Young Frankenstein, but it adorns small, intimate performances as well. All right, more on the designer's choices, and this is representational and presentational design. So representational scenery, costumes, lighting, and sound imitate precisely the kind of environment and details in which the action of the play would occur in real life. At its most extreme, in the movement of naturalism at the end of the 19th century, representational scenery appeared to be a real location in every detail with all the appropriate props and decorations. A domestic interior might include books, magazines, lamps, all three-dimensional objects that could be handled by the actors. If the setting is an exterior, one might see dirt, rocks, grass, fallen leaves, every element one would find or one would expect to find in a natural environment. They do not acknowledge the presence of the audience, and the actor's behavior suggests an imaginary fourth wall. On the other hand, a presentational approach to design offers many possibilities. Presentational scenery, costumes, and lighting can suggest, distort, or even abstract reality. The scenery is often deliberately incomplete or presents an environment that would be impossible to find in life. Such designs may rely primarily on mood, color, shapes, or visual symbols implied by the text of a play or born in the imagination of the director or designer. Unfortunately, the presentational setting is sometimes a choice of expediency due to economic and temporal limitations placed on the theatrical artists. More significantly, it is often an artistic choice that asks the audience to receive the theatrical event in an unexpected or challenging way. The presentational setting may expose the building's permanent architecture or ask us to fill a void with our own imaginings prompted only by scenic suggestions. Presentational costumes can comment on the characters or color code them or suggest the whole by a mere piece. I'm sorry, Molly is on the couch and she's not allowed to be on the couch. We will deal with her in a second. All right, historical versus imaginary. If the production team wants the historical period to be recognizable to the audience, it needs to decide whether to change the location or time period in which the play is set. For example, A Dollhouse by Henrik Ibsen is set in an upstairs multi-room apartment in Norway in the 1870s. The design team might decide to reset the action in the 1920s America or 1980s Tokyo with a focus on commercialism, or in 2009 South Africa with an all-black cast struggling with the residue from apartheid in shifting periods or locations. Of course, some of the local details would need to be altered. All right, interpreting space. Many directors and playwrights have deliberately used little or no scenery in the proscenium space, a choice that calls the audience's attention to the permanent features of the theater, suggests simplicity, and lends a generic sense to the artistic proceedings. Performances under such circumstances are often referred to as meta-theater, or productions that self-consciously comment on the play as taking place in a theater. Molly, down. Yeah, you know better. She's up there pawing at my pillow. We let her up one day to cuddle with us. My husband and I were both on the couch, and now she thinks she can get up on the couch whenever she wants. So We've built in a bad habit. We're bad dog parents. All right. Designers must give considerable attention to the ways in which theatrical space affects the audience experience. Consider a large auditorium versus a small, intimate arena, for example. Imagine the same play being performed in both. Intricate detail will not be noticed by anyone beyond the first few rows in a large theater, and in a small theater space, however, there is greater opportunity for subtlety. Many conditions and spatial relationships can manipulate or alter the theatrical event. Collaborating with space. Obviously, theater artists cannot literally collaborate with space, since space cannot negotiate, but the space that is available or deemed necessary for a production receives much attention from the director and set designer when they are planning, rehearsing, and performing a play. Molly, down. Okay. I'll finish my lecture, and then you're getting off the couch. All right. There are many things about a given space that cannot be altered. Many features, however, can be changed, hidden, eliminated, or adapted. Sometimes practitioners find themselves lost in space, unable to gain control of it and feeling victimized by what is considered inflexible. The space ends up controlling the production rather than the other way around, a situation that is unfortunate but not uncommon. On the other hand, imaginative, talented, and lucky theater artists can make clever use of what might otherwise seem a limitation or a liability. Working with or around an unusual feature sometimes produces a fine theatrical moment that would otherwise have remained undiscovered. All right, we talk about seeing beyond the playwright and director. When a designer joins the artistic team for a new production, he or she will most likely read the play first and then listen to the ideas or concept of the director, or perhaps director and designer will conceptualize together. Whatever the method, the designer is faced with many clues and directions from the written play and many more from the director. Designs are often at their most exciting and imaginative when the designer can not only be true to the intent or spirit of the playwright's creation and the director's vision, but also see and realize things that verify and enhance going beyond the scope of playwright and director. If this were not true, then most playwrights and directors could simply dictate exactly what they want to an accurate draftsperson and skilled carpenters, painters, dressmakers, and tailors. At their best, designs become ideal space, illumination, and character identification, serving the movement and action of the play at that time. The scenic designer's work. The scenic designer creates a home for the action. The shape of the acting space and the look of any scenery or set props are the scenic designer's responsibility. While reading and analyzing the play, the scenic director pays particular attention to any practical considerations. The need for actual doors, for example, or for a certain number of entrances or exits, as well as atmosphere or image that might be reinforced visually. What does the play demand? When thinking about space and design for a specific play, many designers strongly consider what the playwright seemed to have in mind, when that is possible. Other designers dismiss that notion and conceive the production almost exclusively in their own terms. In either case, a designer must take into consideration a play's given circumstance, what the play text specifically calls for. Communicating with the production team. After reading and analyzing the play and meeting with either the director or the entire design team, the scenic designer will usually produce a series of quick sketches. Those are shown to the director as a way of communicating the ideas that have been developing in the designer's head. Through brainstorming and conferencing, the director and designers move towards acceptance or modification of the designs, or sometimes find themselves starting all over. When the designer and director feel that they are on the same wavelength, the designer will execute the following. A ground plan, which is a drafting of the plan of the stage as seen from overhead. A ground plan shows where any scenic pieces or perhaps set props such as furniture are to be placed. The director can see the potential for blocking in the ground plan. The lighting designer can see how the acting area will be shaped and what set pieces need illumination. A section is a drafting showing the vertical elements of the space and their relative positions, for example, the height at which scenery, lighting, and masking are to be hung. A rendering, a picture of the set drawn in perspective from the audience's point of view. The rendering shows most clearly what the stage will look like from the house. It is usually done in color and depicts the appearance of set under lights. A model, a three-dimensional three-dimensional miniature version of the set built to scale, usually 1/4 or 1/2 inch to the foot. A model has the advantage of allowing the director to experiment with spatial possibilities. Some designers choose to do both renderings and a model. Some choose one or the other. When the design receives final approval from the director, the designer, or sometimes a designer's assistant, generates a series of working drawings to show how the scenery is to be built. These draftings may include the following: a front elevation, breaking the set into units to be built and showing each piece of scenery from the front; a painter's elevation, in color showing the plan for painting each piece of scenery; or a rear elevation, showing each piece from the back. Rear elevations are particularly important in constructing the scenery, since a rear view may show how each piece of scenery is to be built. These documents allow the designer to communicate his or her vision to others on the production staff. Traditionally drafted by hand, the drawings can now be generated with greater accuracy, efficiency, and flexibility for changes by using computer imaging. While creating the draftings, the designer establishes sight lines, in other words, determines what the audience can and cannot see. Anything that is visible but should not be is hidden with masking. Black velour draperies or flats that can be hung or placed vertically and horizontally across the stage. Executing the scene design. The set designer develops plans and makes the artistic choices, but relies on technical staff for execution. Throughout the building of the set, the designer communicates frequently with the technical director. The technical director is responsible for the safety of the theater space, for scheduling, for construction and equipment installation, and for making sure designs are executed according to the designer's specifications. As someone with a great deal of technical and practical knowledge, the technical director serves as a problem solver. The technical director oversees the transfer and setup of scenery and props into the stage space. When sets are built on site, a scene shop foreman oversees their construction by a crew of carpenters, scenic painters, and other craftspeople. Commercial productions without a home theater send designs to a special scene shop for construction and then transfer the items to the performance space just before technical rehearsals. The props manager organizes the collection or building of all properties for the show. The Union for Professional Designers is the United Scenic Artists of America. In the professional theater, technical positions are staffed by members of the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, moving picture technicians, artists, and allied crafts of the United States. Its territories in Canada, the labor union representing technicians, artisans, and craftspeople in the entertainment industry. Strict rules about working time and job descriptions protect the livelihood of these professionals. A carpenter, for example, is not allowed to refocus a lighting instrument. An electrician may not hammer a nail. In amateur theater, where the rules are less stringent, volunteers typically pitch in to do the work, often supervised by a professional. Students working for class credit and experience are directed by faculty and staff in educational theaters. Many people who are not interested in performing find fun and fulfillment in working behind the scenes. The lighting designer's work. To a casual observer, the work of the lighting designer is sometimes the least noticeable in a production, yet all the other visual elements depend on it. Lighting at its most basic provides visibility and manipulates that visibility by supporting the moment-to-moment action of the play. Much of the lighting task is about revealing. Lighting the actors is crucial in most productions. Audiences can lose interest quickly if they cannot see the faces of the performers. Because lighting can radically change the mood of a production and the look of costume sets and properties, lighting designers must work very closely with all of their colleagues. The installation of gas lighting in the early 19th century made systematic control of the theatrical lighting possible. A technician could change intensity on the stage or in the house by moving one lever. The open flame of the gas and the possibility of explosion, however, made gas a dangerous addition to theaters. A fireman became a part of the theater staff, meant to remain on duty in case of an emergency, even when the theater was empty. The invention of the long-lasting incandescent light bulb by Thomas Edison and others by 1879 and its subsequent refinement for the theater made the concept of actually designing lighting possible. Early electric lighting systems were still dangerous and caused numerous theater fires, but perfection of the technology led to increased safety and flexibility for the theater artists. Many early directors took full charge of lighting, as did many scenic designers in the early days of electric light. By the 1920s, directors and scenic designers often argued over the right to light the production. As technology developed and the many possibilities became evident, lighting became a design component in its own right, and most lighting designers today tend to specialize in lighting alone, and a number of lighting teams have emerged in the last few decades. Creating movement and mood with lighting. Lighting designers have many tasks. One of the most important, of course, is lighting the actors and the action so that they can be seen clearly, but this is not a simple matter. Lighting must be used to mold the human face and figure. In a stage flooded with light, it may still be difficult to see the actors clearly, and thus shadows in some areas make the 3 dimensions of the face and body apparent. Lighting can make the human form and face look ugly or beautiful, flat or 3-dimensional. Low-angle lighting set below the horizon, such as footlights, can create stark, disturbing images or ghostly faces, shadows that rise from below. And likewise, high-angle or down light can suggest mystery or anonymity in the face, with shadows moving downward from an actor or object. Lighting helps to create mood, and the orchestration of lighting can modify, sustain, or eliminate the mood. A dimly lit stage can create a somber atmosphere, whereas pleasingly bright lighting suggests happiness or stability. If the lighting becomes very intense, however, it can suggest an institutional setting, sterility, or perhaps threat or unseen power. Sometimes lighting is used as a representational tool that heightens the sense of reality. Stage lighting can imitate sun or moonlight, depending on its color. Audiences tend to read blue lighting as moonlight, even though the light of the moon is not really blue. The color suggests moonlight on stage. Light at noon seems to come from directly overhead. In the late afternoon, the angle of the light is nearly horizontal. Objects can be brightly lit on one side and dark on the other, throwing them into relief. Light can be combined with shadow and color to imitate a specific place. It often finishes the job begun by the setting, but lighting alone can alter the set in remarkable ways. Like the other designers, lighting designers sometimes study and adapt techniques from the past. Footlights were standard equipment throughout the era of candles. Oil lamps, gas, and early electricity. They were positioned on the stage floor at the edge of the apron and were focused upward to light the actors. Early in the 20th century, many designers started eliminating footlights. They were considered garish by many innovators and tended to cast strange shadows on the actors' faces. Footlights returned, often selectively for low-angle effects, late in the 20th century. What goes around comes around. The lighting designer's tools. Lighting designers work with 4 basic elements: intensity, how bright the lighting is; color; distribution, how light is spread over the stage, angle, and texture; and orchestration or movement, changes in any of the first 3 elements. Intensity is controlled by the number of lumens pumped onto the stage, which depends on the number of lighting instruments used. Color is created by filtering the light with color media or color filters, translucent sheets of plastic, high-heat polyester, or dichroic filters, tempered glass with metal coating, made in a wide range of colors and placed in front of lighting instruments. Distribution of light is determined by where lighting instruments are placed, as well as types of instruments used. In controlling distribution, today's lighting designers can choose from a wide variety of instruments that are designed to do different jobs. The type of instrument that is used most frequently is a spotlight. Glass lenses create a focused and controllable beam of light, and various shaped metal and glass reflectors affect the quality of light and the shape of the beam. A Fresnel spotlight, for example, uses a lens adapted from 19th century lighthouses. This lens creates a beam of light with a soft edge, and the beams from different instruments can be easily blended to create the appearance of an even area of light. An ellipsoidal spotlight, in contrast, creates a hard-edged beam and includes 4 shutters around the circular lens to further control its focus. A shutter can be moved in to keep a light away from a set wall, for example. Par lamps create parallel rays. Newer automated instruments can change all of the elements electronically. A single instrument may be able to change color, distribution, and intensity instantly. Orchestration of lighting in today's theater is accomplished by using the lighting console, a control board with a memory system. Many instruments can be hung on stage and turned on or off only when they are needed. Intensity can be changed in any area throughout the show by adjusting one or any number of instruments. Color can be changed by intensifying instruments with one particular color filter and dimming others. With the creation of dimmers and lighting consoles in the 20th century, designers developed complicated crossfades, which can be rapid or slow. With the advent of lighting consoles, it became possible to pre-program all of the cues or the time changes sequentially. There are often hundreds in a busy show, so that mistakes by the console operator are minimized and the cues can be precise each time. Projections are often included in current lighting designs. A projection is an image thrown onto the stage using light. The simplest kind of projection uses a metal cutout like a stencil called a gobo. The gobo is inserted in a gate on an ellipsoidal spotlight and the solid areas block the light, casting shadows on the stage. In this way, leafy patterns can be thrown on stage, creating the image of a forest, bars suggesting a prison, or abstract shapes to create any number of effects. Communicating and executing the lighting design. When analyzing the play, the lighting designer will pay particular attention to the play's structure, mood, and all possibilities for orchestration of lighting. If the design is realistic, he or she will consider how the lighting can contribute to establishing time and place, as well as any practicals needed. A practical is a visible light source on stage that is often enhanced by unseen lighting instruments. For example, when a desk lamp or overhead chandelier on stage is turned on, light usually emanates from the practical, but accompanying instruments may punch up the effect and help to imitate and perhaps intensify the light thrown by the practical on the stage. The lighting design process begins at the same time as other designs. The lighting designer meets with the director and production team regularly, and the lighting design evolves with the costume sets and the director's staging, all of which will usually continue to be refined until the production is ready to open. The lighting designer faces a great challenge in trying to communicate his or her vision to the director and production staff, since lighting is the most ephemeral of the theatrical elements. Computer imaging now gives the designer a chance to preview the effectiveness of the lighting and share the effect with the whole creative team. The designer creates a technical drawing or lighting plot showing where each instrument is to be hung, along with the type of instrument and color filters to be used. Before technical rehearsals, a master electrician works closely with the lighting designer and directs a lighting crew to hang, focus, and filter the lighting instruments and to set up circuitry, the lighting console, and sometimes sound equipment also. During Tech Week, the week of technical rehearsals, the director and designer sometimes chooses to have a lighting rehearsal in which the cues, changes in lighting, sound, or set are constructed and run with no actors present. The directors and designers can then look at the lighting on stage together and make adjustments. Stage management and technical staff often stand in for actors when it is important to see the effects of light on a human body. Actors are present for a cue-to-cue technical rehearsal in which only the parts of the play that include cues are run. Any dialogue or action in between is skipped. A technical rehearsal or tech run follows, in which the stage manager, actors, and run crews practice putting all elements except for the costumes together in a complete run of the show. The lighting designer continues to work with the director, stage manager, and technical staff through dress rehearsals, refining and perfecting the contributions of lighting of the total production. A successful lighting designer is a sensitive artist with a mastery of lighting technology. He or she must know the fundamentals of electricity, but above all must be an artist who sculpts and paints with light and has a thorough understanding of the other design positions. The costume designer's work. This is our last designer. I know that you're probably a little designed out. I'm designed out. All right. I keep changing positions. All right, the costume designer's work. Designing costumes becomes important when the theater embraced historical accuracy and an overall artistic vision for production became the norm. The production team, rather than the individual actors, then became responsible for providing costumes that harmonize with the other designs. Costumes can work with lighting and setting to establish the time period and location of the play. The designer must be conversant with various historical styles and forms of dress and have the necessary skills for research. The costume in space. Apparently I can't have the book on the floor and still be able to read it. All right. The costume designer communicates from the beginning with the other designers as well as the director. Through costume choices may evolve as other design elements evolve. When it comes to colors, textures, fabric choices, and finishing details, designers and directors often negotiate so that the furniture, for example, does not clash with the costumes, or in some cases does not erase the costumes since the color and texture nearly match. The costume designer must also be acutely aware of lighting because the stage lighting could severely alter or destroy the image a costume designer is seeking. It is important that the costume, scenic, and lighting designers communicate frequently about these choices. Distance on the stage is also critical to costume design choices. If the designer is creating a costume that will never be closer to the audience than 30 feet from the front row, the choices will be considerably different than if a costume will be seen mostly on the apron or down center. Communicating and executing the costume design. A costume designer begins by showing the director quick sketches that are meant to express basic ideas and offer choices. The director may approve, reject, or ask to see additional development. When the designer and director seem to have reached an agreement as to basic approach, the designer produces costume renderings, pictures of the costumes on the actors. Ideally, a rendering is done for each costume in color, often with appropriate swatches of fabric attached. In creating each design, the costume designer works with 4 variables. A silhouette. Silhouette or line is the outer shape of the costume. It is easy to understand silhouette if you think of a costume as a shadow on the wall. No color and no detail are visible, just the basic shape. Silhouette is particularly indicative of time, period, and culture. The draped and gathered cloth of the Indian sari creates a particular female silhouette. A tight-fitting bodice, tight waist, and skirt flaring out, stopping midway between knee and ankle, make up a typical silhouette from the United States in the 1950s. The profile of an upper-class woman from Europe or the United States in the 1860s to 1880s would reveal a floor-length skirt with a bustle over the rear end. Color. Different colors tend to create different emotional responses in human beings. The designer thinks not only about the effect that a particular color will have on the audience, but also about the message that it sends about the character who chose to wear it. The designer must also understand that symbolic associations with color are culturally specific. White symbolizes purity, is traditional for weddings in the United States, but red, symbolizing good luck, is appropriate for weddings in China. Texture. Texture is the feel of the fabric. Even if an audience member never touches the cloth, the sense of sight gives information about how a fabric feels. Fine, smooth fabrics such as thin silk and satin tend to suggest sophistication. Soft, rich fabrics such as a brocade and velvet suggest wealth. Rougher fabric, homespun for example, can suggest low status or hard times. Associations with texture are also culturally specific. In the United States during the 1930s and 1940s, denim was considered a working man's fabric and was associated with manual labor. Denim is currently fashionable for many people, no matter what the activity or social status. Accent. Accents are details to finish off or set off a costume. Buttons, lace, piping along edges, embroidery, and jewelry are all examples of accent. A woman's dress in a peach color might be accented with large black buttons down the front or a single rhinestone brooch at the shoulder. A single red rose in the lapel of a man's black jacket is a striking accent. Commercial or touring productions without a home theater send the designs to a professional costume shop for construction. All right. The costume designer works closely with the costume shop manager, who coordinates the effects of cutters, stitchers, and other costume personnel. Items pulled from stock must be altered to fit specific actors and might be dyed or changed to achieve the appropriate look. Building a costume from scratch is a labor-intensive process that involves taking the actor's measurements, drafting a pattern, cutting, sewing, and fitting the garment on the actor. The designer often works closely with the costume shop personnel to achieve the look reflected in the original rendering. Costume designers are sometimes responsible for more than clothing. They design makeup and masks, unless a separate designer is assigned those duties. Purses, hats, and shoes must be found or created to coordinate with each costume. The craft area of a costume shop is often a busy place with shop personnel making or trimming hats, constructing masks, making armor, and fashioning jewelry. Early in the design process, the designer creates a costume plot, a chart that records items of clothing worn by each actor in each scene of the play. For small shows, it is fairly simple, but for large cast shows with multiple or quick costume changes, the costume plot is especially important for organization. Finished costumes are usually the final visual element added to production. During Tech Week, some directors like to have a costume parade. Actors are dressed in costumes and appear under the appropriate stage lights. The director and designer discuss any changes that ought to be made. At the first dress rehearsal, the actors wear and use all of the items created for them while performing the entire play. Ideally, actors will have used substitutes during rehearsals for any items that would cause major changes in movement. Rehearsal skirts, for example, are frequently used to approximate long skirts of earlier periods. If corsets are to be worn, the actors must work with them early to learn how to adjust breathing and movement. All right, the sound designer's work. We're almost there, guys, I promise. Until just before the Great Depression, sound effects and music in the theater were created live by technicians or musicians. Some well-equipped theaters from the Elizabethans to the 19th century featured machines such as thunder runs, wooden troughs in the floor, above the stage level, or even over the house, into which heavy balls could be rolled to create the rumbling effect of thunder. A more traditional approach was the thunder sheet, a large sheet of metal that a stagehand could strike or shake to mimic the rolling and crashing of thunder. Recorded sound was first used in the production of Elmer Rice's Street Scene in 1929, which featured the nearly constant sound of a busy New York street. Obviously, recording and playback methods since that time have become very sophisticated thanks to high-speed techniques, audio mixing, and editing, computerized sound consoles, and digital recording. Productions still use live music, of course, and sometimes sound effects are created live, but aside from musicals, most sound in the theater is now recorded. Since the 1980s, sound design has emerged as an independent and dynamic part of the design process. When analyzing the script, the sound designer looks particularly for an ambient sound that is suggested, crickets chirping, music from a nearby carnival, as well as effects that are important to the action of the play, an offstage car crash, a train passing, gunfire. The director and designer sometimes decide on effects that are not called for in the script to support mood or suggest action happening offstage. Many pre-recorded sound effects have long been available on records, tapes, and compact discs. Computer software now allows designers to retrieve, create, and digitally modify various kinds of sound effects. For many musicals since the 1960s, actors wear wireless body mics or microphones and sometimes headsets. In most cases, body mics are hidden from view in costumes, but usually close to the face. Such an amplification system must be created or adapted by the sound designer, especially with the advent of rock musicals and the introduction of electronic musical equipments not only to rock, but also to many styles of music. The electronic control of sound becomes vital to performance. Integrating all designs. Designers work closely with the director to meld their contributions into an artistic whole. The task becomes increasingly complex yet exciting as technology opens up new possibilities. All right. Respond to your discussion boards. I am looking for good banter back and forth.